Добре дојдовте во неделното интервју на Радио Слободна Европа. Наш денешен гостин е британскиот амбасадор во земјава, неговата екселенција Кристофер Ивон. Амбасадоре, по сите политички случувања кои што ги одбележаа изминатите неколку месеци, кои се вашите очекувања од октомврискиот извештај на Европската комисија за напредокот на нашата земја?
The United Kingdom, of course, is not the author of the annual progress report. That's a task that the European Commission is mandated to carry out. So it's very difficult for me to anticipate or speculate the fine detail of the progress report. I think like in previous years, it will be accurate, fair and balanced, both in its acknowledgement of where progress has been made throughout the year, and also I think some of the areas where further progress will be required in order to improve that alignment with EU standards.
Секако извештајот ќе го почекаме, но може ли да прогнозирате кои би биле тие области кои според вас ќе бидат критикувани или области во кои што ќе треба повеќе да работиме?
Well, I think progress reports in the past have always been very balanced. I think it would be highly unusual for a progress report not to have areas of further development for any country. So I think it's not to look at it as criticism of failure, it's more to look at it as those areas that need more work. I think, for example, political dialogue is an area that's been mentioned in previous progress reports. You mentioned the 24th of December. In some ways, I think the months immediately afterwards showed that political dialogue was not as strong as it could be. However, the Commission of Inquiry, having now achieved a report and the progress that's being made to forming the working group, demonstrates there are areas where political dialogue actually can work successfully. And that's the kind of balanced judgments that I would expect there to be in the progress report.
Една од препораките на комисијата беше целосно спроведување на Мартовскиот договор, што пак од своја страна подразбираше и финален извештај на адхок комисијата за истражување на настаните од 24 декември. Може ли да кажете дека комисијата успешно си ја заврши својата работа со оглед на тоа што, за владеачката партија, иако потпишан, извештајот не е валиден?
I think that the key part of the report from the Commission of Inquiry really is around the recommendations. I mean, the purpose, as I would see it, of the report is to try to ensure that the events that we saw on our TV screens on the 24th of December do not reoccur, and that there's every effort by political leaders from all parties to do whatever they can to learn the lessons of the 24th. I think that's really the purpose of the report. So it's the section around recommendations that is key. And I think the thing that we'll have to carefully, I think, look at is how that is implemented. Now, the report is owned, of course, by political parties in Macedonia, and it's in the interests of the citizens of Macedonia. But of course, where Britain has a voice in European Union discussions, we'll want to look very carefully at how that implementation moves forward. That will be a pointer to future progress reports and their content, as long as they exist.
Реална ли е според вас опасноста Македонија да ја изгуби препораката за почеток на преговори со Европската Унија?
Well, I would very much hope not. Theoretically, it is possible for a recommendation not to be repeated, but I'm not aware of any country going through the accession process where that's ever happened. It would be quite a big step, it would be unprecedented, and I very much hope that Macedonia is not seen in that category. Britain would like to see the opening of accession negotiations. We support the Council making such a decision based on the recommendations that have been there since 2009. So I very much hope that that would not be the case.
Амбасадоре, како гледате на најавата за можни предвремени избори, иако опозицијата, барем засега, категорички ја отврли таквата варијанта?
Well, I think you are right. It's not for Britain to interfere and try to tell other countries when they should and should not have elections. That really is a matter for the politicians and for Parliament in Macedonia. In fact, what we have done in Britain since the last election in 2010 is to introduce a piece of legislation that fixes the length of our Parliament, so that actually we are moving away from the possibility of having early elections in the United Kingdom system. Now, it's for people here to decide how often those elections should be. But if I was an investor, for example, or a businessman looking at issues around predictability and I was going to have to consider calculating risk, a sign of stability can be that governments, once elected, carry out their entire mandate on the behalf of the people of a country. So I think those are questions for the politicians to work through, but I can certainly see the benefit of trying to avoid having repetitive, frequent elections.
Предлог законот за медиуми предизвика доста реакции во јавноста, и тоа не само од домашните медиумски асоциации и организации, туку и од меѓународните. А дали според вас, амбасадоре, на Македонија е неопходно едно вакво законско решение?
Well, I'm not an expert in the Macedonian legal system, so it's very difficult for me to come up with a scientific, yes, you must have a law, or no, not. I think we need to let people here decide. One very positive thing is that it seems to me there has been a huge amount of debate, and a lot of that debate appears to have happened openly, as well as, I'm sure, in many discussions amongst the representatives over the draft law. So I think the real key thing around the question of whether a law is needed is actually the content and how it will be implemented. And I know that many people disagree about how they believe interpretation of the law will actually go forward, but of course we can't know that until it is implemented. So I think it's the focus on the implementation phase is the key part for any law.
Амбасадоре, кои се вашите очекувања од натамошниот развој на преговорите помеѓу Македонија и Грција во врска со прашањето за името? Нимиц беше во регионот, од Атина ни порача дека конечно разбира грчката позиција, во Скопје повтори дека Грција го одбила предлогот од април. Решение очигледно нема, ситуацијата е статус-кво, а преговорите продолжуваат.
I've said all along, I think since the day that I arrived, I'd very much like to see a solution found soon, one which is mutually agreeable and under the auspices of the United Nations. But I have to acknowledge that is an extremely difficult task, of course, and it is only going to be with great determination, leadership and flexibility that I think a solution can be found. And I do believe a solution can be found, but it may require more of the talking before we get to that point.
Имате ли впечаток дека и кај двете страни недостасува политичка волја за решение на овој долгогодишен спор?
Well, that's not something that I would necessarily recognise. I mean, you're never going to know behind the scenes how much each side really wants to find this solution. So, that's difficult to quantify really. But in my discussions, both when I've travelled down to Athens and to northern Greece, and also all the discussions during my time here, the expression has been a real determination to find a solution. So I take that at trust.
Што мислите за предлогот кој што председателот Ѓорги Иванов го спомена, во смисла на паралелни процеси да бидат и преговорите за името и преговорите за членство со Европската Унија? Можен ли е еден таков модел и колку тој би бил успешен во нашиот случај?
I think it is possible. And Britain actually would not have a difficulty with that because we would like to see accession negotiations opened, and that suggests you do it on the merit of conditionality, and that the search for a solution on the name issue should not stop that from moving forward. Britain wouldn't have a problem with it, but to get to that stage of opening accession negotiations, you do need the Council, the European Council as a whole, to make that decision and accept it. And I can't really say that the Council has really had that debate. I think the discussion so far has taken place on the basis of the content of the progress report, but clearly we've not quite managed to achieve that consensus that Britain would like to see.
Ваша Екселенцијо, ви благодарам што бевте наш гостин.
Thank you very much for your time.
Вам почитувани ви благодарам за вниманието со кое не следевте. Довидување за 7 дена.